The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it lived in the air, a constant, misty reminder of things unfinished. Maya sat by her window, the steam from her chamomile tea long gone, leaving only a lukewarm floral scent behind. At 32, the silence of her apartment had begun to sound less like peace and more like absence. She looked at the empty chair across from her, a space she had saved in her heart for a decade. Every wedding invitation on her fridge felt like a gentle bruise, a reminder that while the world moved in pairs, she was still a solo melody. "Lord, I'm not asking for a perfect man," she whispered, her voice cracking the stillness. "I'm just asking for mine." She had done everything the books told her to do. She had worked on her career, she had served in the children's ministry, and she had guarded her heart with a fortress of prayers. But tonight, the theology of the wait felt less like a spiritual discipline and more like a heavy wool coat she couldn't take off. She wondered if God was truly listening, or if her prayers were simply bouncing off the ceiling, lost among the shadows of her ceiling fan. Deep in her heart, a quiet impression began to form, not a voice, but a feeling, like the warmth of the sun through a cloud. It was the realization that a no or a not yet isn't a rejection, it's a protection. Maya thought back to her last relationship 3 years ago. It had been passionate but draining, a whirlwind that left her spiritual garden trampled. She realized she had been trying to plant a redwood in a pot designed for a shrub. God wasn't withholding a husband. He was expanding her capacity to love, pruning the dead branches of her own insecurities so that she wouldn't lean on a man for the strength only a creator could provide. The smell of old paper and dust filled her senses as she opened her Bible to the Psalms. She stopped at the words, "He leads me beside still waters." Maya realized she had been treating the wait as a hallway to be sprinted through, rather than a sanctuary to be lived in. If God gave her what she wanted today, would she even have the room for it? Or would she be so busy holding on to her gift that she'd stop holding on to the giver? The wait was the refining fire, burning away the idea of marriage to prepare her for the reality. The realization didn't come as a lightning bolt, but as the slow, steady mounting of a tide. Maya began to notice the ways she had built her identity around a person who didn't exist yet. She had been living in a waiting room version of her own life, keeping the good china packed away and the guest room empty, as if her joy were on layaway. One Tuesday evening, while the smell of rain-damp pavement wafted through her cracked window, she decided to stop waiting to live. She began to host dinners for the widows in her neighborhood, realizing that her singleness wasn't a lack of family, but an expansion of it. Her hands, once clenched in desperate prayer, were now open to serve. While Maya was learning the beauty of the present, miles away, a man named Caleb was undergoing his own quiet transformation. He was a man who had once valued his career above his character, a man who had known the Bible but hadn't yet known the author. God was working on him with the same precision he used on Maya. Caleb was learning how to lead by first learning how to follow. He was learning how to be a husband by first learning how to be a son of the Most High. The not yet wasn't just for Maya's protection, it was for Caleb's preparation. The bridge between them was being built from both sides, stone by heavy stone, in the invisible realm. Maya eventually understood that God is a master gardener who never picks fruit before it is sweet. If she had met Caleb years ago, she would have used him to fill a hole that only God could fill. She would have made him her idol instead of her partner. The weight had hollowed out her soul so that it could hold more of God's glory. She found herself standing in a park one afternoon, the air smelling of pine and fresh-cut grass, and for the first time, she didn't feel a pang of loneliness when she saw a couple walking by. She felt a profound sense of peace. She was whole, not because she had a husband, but because she had found the bridegroom of her soul. The meeting happened on a mundane Thursday at a small community garden project. There was no choir of angels, no sudden burst of music, just the smell of damp earth and the shared effort of planting seeds. When Maya reached for a shovel, another hand reached for it at the same time. She looked up and saw eyes that held the same, slow-burn peace she had spent years cultivating. Caleb didn't look like a prince from a fairy tale. He looked like a man who had walked through his own desert and found the spring. In that moment, Maya realized that the reason for the not yet was so that when the now finally arrived, she would have the eyes to recognize it. Their first conversation wasn't about interests or accolades. It was about the terrain of the soul. As they sat on a weathered park bench, the scent of blooming jasmine swirling around them, Caleb spoke of his own years in the wilderness. He described the crushing weight of his former pride and the way God had to dismantle his life to rebuild his heart. Maya listened, her heart beating in a rhythmic "im." She realized that their shared language wasn't just faith, but the specific dialect of those who had been made to wait. Every scar of loneliness she carried was a map that Caleb knew how to read, and for the first time, she didn't feel the need to hide the years of not yet. But the yes of God isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new kind of work. As their relationship blossomed, Maya found old fears creeping back like weeds in a garden. When Caleb was late for a call, or when they had their first disagreement over something small, the ghost of her old loneliness whispered that it was all too good to be true. She had to learn that the theology of the wait had prepared her for the theology of the sacrifice. Loving a real person was harder than loving a prayer request. It required the patience she had practiced with God to now be practiced with a man who was also a work in progress. One evening, standing on the balcony of her apartment, the same place where she had spent so many nights in tears, Maya looked up at the stars and realized something profound. If Caleb were taken away tomorrow, she would still be okay. Her foundation was no longer built on the hope of a husband, but on the rock of her Redeemer. She had finally placed her desire on the altar, not to get what she wanted, but to give God what he deserved, her total trust. It was in this moment of complete surrender that the wait truly fulfilled its purpose. She wasn't just ready for a wedding. She was ready for a marriage. Maya began to see that her life wasn't a series of delays, but a sequence of seasons, each with its own necessary harvest. She realized that the version of herself from 5 years ago would have clung to Caleb with an iron grip, suffocating the love she so desperately craved. The wait had been a divine classroom where she learned the art of breathing, of letting go so that things could grow. She looked at her journals from the dark years, the ink blurred by tears, and realized they were now a roadmap for others. She wasn't just a woman who had found a husband, she was a woman who had found her voice. The day Caleb proposed wasn't on a mountaintop or under a firework-filled sky. It was in the middle of a quiet Tuesday, while they were cleaning up after a church car wash, their clothes damp and smelling of soap and summer heat. He didn't promise her a life without pain. He promised her a life where they would face the pain together, anchored in the same spirit. As he knelt on the wet pavement, Maya didn't see just a man. She saw the physical manifestation of God's faithfulness. Her yes wasn't a scream of relief. It was a whispered prayer of gratitude. The not yet had finally folded into the now. As she prepared for her wedding, Maya finally understood the reason why she had to wait. It wasn't because she wasn't good enough, or because God was testing her endurance for sport. It was because the story God was writing was bigger than her comfort. If she had married early, she would have missed the chance to know God as her husband when she was husbandless. She would have missed the strength she found in the silence. She realized that the wait wasn't a punishment. It was a period of sanctification that made her more like Christ. The marriage was the gift, but the wait was the miracle. A year into her marriage, Maya sat on her porch with Caleb, the smell of fresh cedar and roasted coffee filling the air. She realized that the wait hadn't just changed her, it had equipped her. When friends called her, weeping over their own empty chairs and unanswered prayers, she didn't offer them platitudes. She offered them the weight of her own history. She understood that her story was a lighthouse for those still lost in the fog of the not yet. The pain of her past had become the medicine for someone else's future. The theology of the wait wasn't just a lesson she had learned. It was a ministry she was now living. As the sun began to set on another day, Maya took a deep breath, the air tasting of crisp pine and promise. She looked back at the rainy window in Seattle where her journey began and whispered a final thank you for the silence. She saw now that God hadn't been quiet. He had been composing a masterpiece. The "not yet" was the space between the notes that made the music beautiful. As she leaned her head on Caleb's shoulder, she closed her eyes, finally understanding that while the husband was a blessing, the God who guided her through the wait was the true prize. Her heart, once a cavern of longing, was now a cathedral of praise. If Maya's journey touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories of faith, share this message of hope with someone who is waiting, and comment below with your own story of the theology of the wait. We want to pray with you.